The stranger. Maybe it's someone you avoided or shunned simply because they were foreign or unfamiliar. Maybe it's someone you met somewhere far away, on a train, or out on a walk, or sitting on a bench in the park, who you poured or shared yourself, your story, or some secret or buried part of your heart or life out to. Maybe it's someone you dearly loved, that love later lost, became unknown, no longer seeable or any way meetable. Maybe it's just a mystery you have yet to enter, another person you have yet to discover, to understand, to see as a fellow being, a kindred spirit. Maybe it's you. Welcome to the latest Floating Poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in, for taking a break in your day and bringing your outer and inner ears and other senses to this listening time together. I'm delighted to have you here for show 179, coming to you live from the foreign to familiar coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and guide in the poetosphere, Colin Goedecke, a voice here and elsewhere for living our days more fully, more lively, more poetically. Last week's broadcast was Hello Neighbor, on bringing our best presents to our neighbors and neighborhoods, taking down instead of building up fences and defenses between us and all good neighbors, being and appreciating thoughtful, heartful neighbors, whether next door or in whatever neighborhood we live in, including how much we're in need of much greater, much truer community in our neighborhoods, our towns, our cities, our countries, our whole society. Well, this week, the stranger, how we perceive, relate to, interact with strangers, and also our conditioned and other preconceived ideas of and associations around and encounters with them. People who at root are simply others, or another person we just don't know. How we ourselves are strangers in some other people's eyes and minds. Yes, it cuts both ways. And yet, how we can have surprisingly memorable experiences with strangers, like I began to speak of in that poem just now, including opening ourselves up, telling some of our life story to them or them to us, however foreign or otherwise unfamiliar to us or we are to them. Also, how we may at times and places appear to be outsiders or outliers, yet are still and always part of one shared humanity, in many ways not so strange at all. And in a place of being where we can always connect from that place of purer humanness, regardless of differences of appearance, language, customs, beliefs. So, I've assembled a show of cultural commentary, quotes, poetry, and anecdotes around this theme for us to take in together, to explore and discover together whatever we might. And perhaps we begin with the voice of a stranger. This is Scudder Middleton's poem, The Stranger. I am the lonely man the crowds pass by. I am the listener in the dim-lit room above the street. I am he who waits and knows not why. O city, have you no gift for me? Have you no healing word to speak? No voice of all your many voices I can understand? I have come a long way over roads that wounded. I entered your streets with a dream in my breast. Be not cruel, for I came to love you. Show me a flower or the face of a friend. Stranger, thank you. Scudder Middleton, how about that for a name? Walt Whitman, to a stranger. Passing stranger, you do not know how longingly I look upon you. You must be he I was seeking, or she I was seeking. It comes to me as of a dream. I have somewhere surely lived a life of joy with you. All is recalled as we flit by each other, fluid, affectionate, chaste, matured. You grew up with me, were a boy with me, or a girl with me. I ate with you and slept with you. Your body has become not yours only, nor left my body mine only. You give me the pleasure of your eyes, face, flesh as we pass. You take of my beard, breast, hands in return. I am not to speak to you. I am to think of you when I sit alone or wake at night alone. I am to wait. I do not doubt I am to meet you again. I am to see to it that I do not lose you. Beautiful. I had not read that before. You might have, but I haven't. So I thought I'd bring that forth. Thank you, Walt Whitman. Always need to thank the great Whitman. Well, here's a piece that I found in my 7 layers of Troy of research and material that I've collected over many years and decades, but I could not find the reference to who the writer of the book is that I saved some loose pages of. So I'm just going to, whoever that is, thank you. The power of the stranger lies in what they bring out in us. With strangers, there is a temporary reordering of a balancing act that each of us is constantly attempting between our past selves and our future selves, between who we have been and who we are becoming. Your friends and family know who you have been, and they often make it harder to try out who you might become. But you're not the singing type. Why would you want to be a doctor when you hated biology in school? I guess I just don't see you doing stand-up. Strangers, unconnected to our past, and in most cases to our futures, are easier to experiment around. They create a temporary freedom to pilot test what we might become, however untethered that identity is to what we have been. They allow us to try out new sides. In front of a stranger, we are free to choose what we want to show, hide, or even invent. Some extreme gatherers so believe in this stranger spirit that they organize gatherings entirely for and of strangers, like the 76th birthday celebration of the Oxford professor Theodore Zeldin. Zeldin, a renowned historian of France and a famed philosopher with a wild white mane, decided that year that he would hold a birthday party for people he didn't know. He issued a public invitation through the BBC for everyone who was interested to join him in Regent's Park in London at a particular date and time, and to celebrate his birthday by talking to someone they didn't know. Well, hundreds of people showed up to that. It was quite the occasion. Would have been interesting to be there. From Wikipedia, stranger. The presence of a stranger can throw an established social order into question. Quote, because the stranger is neither friend nor enemy, and because he may be both. The distrust of strangers has led to the concept of stranger danger and the expression don't talk to strangers, wherein excessive emphasis is given to teaching children to fear them despite the most common sources of abduction or abuse being people known to the child. Of the billions of people in the world, the vast majority of people are strangers to one another. A stranger is typically represented as an outsider and a source of ambivalence. The word stranger itself derives from the Middle French word étranger, meaning a foreigner or alien. Of course, it currently is, I believe, étranger. So that's the origin of it. And the only other thing I wanted to share from this is in willingness to disclose information, researchers have identified what has been dubbed the stranger on the train phenomenon, wherein individuals are inclined to share a great deal of personal information with anonymous individuals. This may be influenced by the temporary nature of the relationship and the knowledge that the stranger themselves have no access to an individual's wider social circle. As one author put it, the phenomenon is ironically best described by the words of travel writer Paul Theroux, saying, "The conversation, like many others I had with people on trains, derived an easy candor from the shared journey, the comfort of the dining car, and the certain knowledge that neither of us would see each other again." I do have a couple of questions that relate to that shortly for you and us. There is by the way, a concept in sociological literature of the, quote, professional stranger, the person who intentionally maintains an intellectual distance from the community in order to observe and understand it. So, Mariah Bosch, B-O-S-C-H, obituary generator. Blank died alone and in the morning, surrounded by strangers who cataloged every blemish. Family arrived to confirm the location of each freckle. She was born in blank and died nearby. She is survived by blank and blank, and they've already began forgetting, whether they know or not. She never wore collared shirts because they reminded her of her head's attachment to her body. Blank died in the afternoon but did not live comfortably past the morning. Their family did not know them, and neither do I. Blank died in his 2-car garage next to 1 car. Blank liked his cars and his garage very much. He is survived by 2 cars nestled still in their garage. They cannot visit his grave. Blank died alone. He had brown eyes that needed glasses. He was born on a farm and dreamt of it. He wore T-shirts ordered from Facebook, generated by an algorithm and printed at an office, and shorts covered in pockets to fill with peppermint patties for their blank. Blank drank chocolate Pedialyte as his only nutrient, but constantly craved purple grape juice in the end. Interesting poem. Mariah Bosch, thank you. Obituary generator. You can find that at poets.org. All right. Questions about strangers for you. How do you feel about strangers? Where do those feelings come from? Are they from your direct experiences? Are they from your family? Are they from film or literature? From your cultural conditioning, perhaps? Something to think about. What interesting, surprising, or powerful experiences have you had with a stranger, or more than one stranger at a time? Did you ever think you're just as much of a stranger to the person you see as one and treat as one? Interesting. I think most people would not think that way, but it's true. What was your last great or good encounter with a stranger? Was it some gesture they made? Or something appreciated they said to you, maybe a compliment out of the blue? Isn't it wonderful when that happens? I always remember those times when someone turns and says, "Oh, beautiful suit," for example, or what, some compliment, and out of the blue. And I love that. I like to do that too when I move too, which is often with others. Via the Marginalian. 500,000 Strangers' Secrets. Post-Secret founder Frank Warren. So he had a TED Talk, and Maria Popova spoke of it in his book, and his website was very interesting. I just started to dip into it. She said, "A friend once told me she believed secrets were these beautiful things that, quote, break when shared, but the breakage itself can be a thing of beauty. Since January of 2005, strangers have been writing, drawing, collaging, doodling, and otherwise revealing their most tightly guarded secrets on anonymous postcards and mailing them to Frank Warren's Post-Secret Project. Last month, he took to the TED stage to share the remarkable story of this collective exercise in compassion and crack open the shell of the human condition." So, postsecret.com is his site. or the books by that name, if that catches your interest, to pass that on. Actually, I'm just curious if there are any strangers around you right now as you're listening, or who you think of as strangers. Might be out walking or sitting somewhere out in the public. Mark Strand, The Prediction. That night the moon drifted over the pond, turning the water to milk, and under the boughs of the trees, the blue trees, a young woman walked, and for an instant the future came to her. Rain falling on her husband's grave, rain falling on the lawns of her children, her own mouth filling with cold air, strangers moving into her house, a man in her room writing a poem, the moon drifting into it, a woman strolling under its trees, thinking of death, thinking of him, thinking of her, and the wind rising and taking the moon and leaving the paper dark. Thank you, Mark Strand. I like that. I know a lot of his work, but I didn't know that. I was happy to bring that forth. Think about how children experienced strangers, how we as children experienced them. And, not least adopted ones and their, quote, strange new parents. So this is Patricia Hicks's poem, The Strangers. After we picked you up at the Omaha airport, we clamped you into a new car seat and listened to you yowl beneath the streetlights of Nebraska. Our hotel suite was plump with toys, ready, we hoped, to soothe you into America. But for a solid hour you watched the door, shrieking, Oma, the Korean word for mother. Once or twice you glanced back at us, and in this netherworld where a door home had slammed shut forever, your terrified eyes paced between the past and the future. Oma, you screamed, Oma! But your foster mother back in Seoul never appeared. Your new mother and I lay on the bed, cooing your birth name, until, at last, you collapsed into our arms. In time, even terror must yield to sleep. Thank you, Patricia Hicks, for that. Dorian Laux, Laux. I've read her work before for different reasons, different themes. For the sake of strangers, no matter what the grief, its weight, we are obliged to carry it. We rise and gather momentum, the dull strength that pushes us through crowds. And then the young boy gives me directions so avidly. A woman holds the glass door open, waiting patiently for my empty body to pass through. All day it continues, each kindness reaching toward another. A stranger singing to no one as I pass on the path. Trees offering their blossoms. A child who lifts his almond eyes and smiles. Somehow they always find me, seem even to be waiting, determined to keep me from myself, from the thing that calls to me as it must have once called to them, this temptation to step off the edge and fall weightless away from the world. Thank you, Dorian Laux. It's a piece of mine from New York City, January 2017, from a story an old friend at that time told me that inspired it right away, pretty much. It's called The Kiss. It's a poem for P.W. out in the Midwest. A Cavafy dream come true. Man to man. An impassioned stranger entering a room, entering your gaze and then the body of your mouth, your youth. A kiss that has lasted nearly half a century and the taste of your memory. The kiss. Have you experienced anything like that? And anything indelibly sensual with a stranger in your life? Well, there's one other of mine. This is from my immersive exhibition of theater on paper called Behind the Curtain, from the debut in New York in the spring of 2018. And the visual poem for this show that you see, or may have seen at the beginning, is the story character of this particular poem. Each poem had a story that the character told and had an image of them. This was the stranger. Arrived suddenly, bathed in late winter moonlight, stood in silhouette, bare but for his head. Sensed he was welcome here, in this way, at this dreaming hour. Knew he was not unknown, but not a stranger. Whereupon he entered the room where I rose to enfold him. Well, I'm also curious to know, by the way, at what point do you let yourself cross the line between treating someone as a stranger and then as a non-stranger? What's the lead element? And what about when you know someone or think you know them incredibly well, but then you discover that there are certain parts of them that are entirely unknown or opaque or very much unfamiliar? TheObserver.com, they did a review of a book that Malcolm Gladwell had written, Talking to Strangers, a fascinating study of why we misread those we don't know. And there was just one paragraph I wanted to share from that, from the review. When we try to systemize doubt, argues Gladwell, we empower our worst instincts. There are sound evolutionary social reasons why we're inclined more toward trust than suspicion. If it was suspicion that formed the basis of all interaction between strangers, we would never have learned to cooperate on such a vast and complex scale. That was a good and interesting and noteworthy point for us. Well, how about this? This is from Raptitude.com. How to be a good stranger. All right. I don't have the author's name here, or the writer's name, but from Raptitude. Like most people probably do, I like to think I'd be one of the more helpful and welcome members of this new post-apocalyptic family, but I'm not sure why I think that. It's probably the Lake Wobegon effect, our tendency to overestimate our value and capabilities in relation to others. It's the same phenomenon that has 90% of us believing we're better than average drivers. I'm trying to overcome the habit of justifying these casual internal condemnations of strangers. Instead, I see if I can overcome my initial negative impression completely whenever I notice I'm being judgy. My new response to that negativity is this. I decide to drop the low-level resentment and instead become their secret ally for the few minutes we are in each other's presence. Actually, this makes me think, just before I finish this piece of the broadcast that you may or may not have heard, number 162, Who Do You Want in Your Lifeboat? Feels apropos. Casual disdain for the odd stranger, for those of us who are prone to it, is a long-conditioned reaction, and it doesn't take much to trigger it. But in spite of my conditioning, I'd rather err on the side of being too approving and too forgiving of strangers than settle into lasting resentment at the slightest offense. We make snap judgments of others all the time, and it's not really on purpose. Those kinds of thoughts happen like reflexes, but we don't have to believe them. If my initial impression of a stranger is a negative one, there's no reason to take for granted that he truly is undeserving of respect, help, or well wishes. In fact, I'm almost certainly wrong to come to any conclusions about a person's character after only, quote, knowing them for 3 seconds. And I no longer believe that these kinds of judgments are somehow helpful to the world at large, that I'm somehow upholding order and civilization with my intolerance of any perceived infringement of sidewalk ethics. They are only helpful in a completely self-serving way to convince myself that I shouldn't be experiencing the inconvenience I'm currently experiencing. If you live among strangers, chances are you're constantly becoming a private adversary to other people in ways you could never comprehend. Maybe somebody at the grocery store secretly hates you because of where you lock your bike up, or because you ride a bike at all. Or maybe you stand too close in the ATM line, or you use too many buzzwords, or you're breaking some unwritten rule in a restaurant, or you're in the way and have no idea. When you think of all the petty things for which you privately condemn someone at one time or another, It's no stretch at all to imagine how often you are, in someone else's eyes, clearly a bad person. I've discovered that as much as I value good sidewalk etiquette and awareness of one's surroundings, I want to be the secret adversary of as few people as possible. So part of my recovery is this new habit of becoming a secret ally to a given stranger the moment I notice I'm tempted to become his secret enemy. Not only does it make that particular instance a much more positive and enjoyable interaction for me, but it's quickly lightening up my overall relationship to strangers, even to the entire species. I like that. Humanity. That's what that's about. This next is also from a page I printed out, but lost the reference to where it's from. Nonetheless, very apropos, and I happen to have been in this very place with this fellow I'm about to tell you about and experienced him firsthand, and it was absolutely true and wonderful. Few understand the art of honor and awe better than Dario Cecchini, an 8th-generation Tuscan butcher in the village of Panzano in Chianti, Italia. When you walk into the Macelleria Cecchini, a tiny butcher shop that attracts as pilgrims some of the leading chefs in the world, you instantly see Cecchini's mastery of openings. He hugs almost everyone who walks in, whether stranger or friend. He may hand a bewildered newcomer a cup of wine. He did that with me, and a piece of bread spread with lard the moment they step into the shop. Most nights, after hours, right above the butcher shop, he seats 30 strangers at a long wooden table before a roaring grill. Before anyone gets a bite of his preparations, he raises 2 bloody Fiorentina steaks above his head, thundering, "To beef or not to beef?" It's quite. Maybe you've been there, but if you haven't, and I don't know if he's still there. It would be wonderful to experience it. He's quite genuine in it all. Well, there you have Italy, but how about Greece? This is from Greece-is.com. On Homer's, the great Homer's hospitality, the ancient roots of Greek philoxenia. Greece is known as a welcoming destination where visitors are treated as honored guests. From where does this open-armed approach stem? Myth and history hold the clues. Zeus's Xenios, quote, the stranger's god. I didn't know there was a stranger's god, that he was that god, or there was one, ruled as hospitality's chief protector. Regardless of a guest's identity, king, general, other dignitary, friend, or simple messenger, one had to welcome them with food, drink, and shelter before asking any questions, including who they were. Well, unique scenes found in Homer's works, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Homeric hymns. They reflect a traditional formula. Here it is. Arrival, the wait at the threshold, the supplication, the reception, the seating, the feast, the after-dinner drink, the identification of the visitor, an exchange of information, entertainment, the visitor's blessing on the host, the shared libation or sacrifice, the request for sleep, the bed, the bath, the host's attempts to detain the visitor, the guest's gifts, the departure meal and libation, the farewell blessing, the departure omen and interpretation, and the escort to the visitor's next destination. Well, friends, what if we took a page from Homer's book of hospitality to strangers? It might be quite amazing. What about the custom of some, or from the past, distant, ancient, where travelers who were strangers were welcomed and well-treated, like we just read, in ancient Greece, which, by the way, I understand, were also even well-oiled, not just well-received and well-fed. Well, that, back in 1998, sparked a poem. Yes, so here it is. Here's mine. Classical Greek salad serves a phalanx. You say the ancient Greeks in Odysseus' time were bathed, oiled, and dressed before dinner. I imagine epic handfuls of Olympic men thrown in a large wooden bowl with virgin olive oil and tossed with heroic action. Yes, I have my my whimsies. As some of you know well, there's a book you might enjoy. Advice from My 80-Year-Old Self is the title. It's an artist's bittersweet legacy of real wisdom from strangers 7 to 88. She was an artist and curator. She's not alive now. Died rather young and tragically. Susan O'Malley actually died right after the book was published. She asked 100 ordinary people between the ages of 7 and 88 what advice their 80-year-old selves would give to their present-day selves. That's really quite something. I'll point you to that book. Tim Ferriss. This is from his 5-Bullet Friday. He says, what I'm rereading, Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein. Ever feel like you don't quite fit in? Don't want to follow society's silly rules? Then you'll probably relate to human-born and Martian-raised Valentine Michael Smith. In this controversial 1960s cult classic, Heinlein questions long-held assumptions on religion, government, and sexuality. Free Martian love for all. It's also where the term grok originates. Do you know this book? I have never read it. I've heard of it. But imagine meeting a being from another planet. Science, that would be science nonfiction. I don't know. There's some rumblings out there about saying that it might be coming sooner than we think. Well, it'll be interesting if it does. And I have a feeling there's many different kinds of beings like we would see in those old Star Wars movies. What about songs about strangers? I was curious about. There are quite a few actually, but I dialed up some. This is from musicalmeme.com. Whether it's someone you knew intimately or just a random passerby from the bar, many artists have chosen to write songs about strangers. This piece will explore 20 different songs of this variety and take a closer look at what inspired the artist to write them. We're not going to go through all. I just have a few of them for you, but you might know some. The Kindness of Strangers by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. A chilling song warns us about the unexpected perils of the unknown, spun around Mary, a small-town Arkansas girl with big dreams. Hello Stranger by Ivan Eliman. A mesmerizing dive into the murky waters of rekindling with an old flame. Leonard Cohen, The Stranger Song. A raw exploration of commitment struggles, wrapped in Cohen's timeless lyricism, inspired by the 1955 film The Man with the Golden Arm. I remember that film with Frank Sinatra. I'm not sure I know Cohen's song, at least by the title. Maybe I have to hear it. Less Than Strangers by Tracy Chapman. Tunes into the awkward tension of running into an ex-lover. It serves as an emotional mirror reflecting the discomfort of seeing a person you once intimately knew, but now you can't even say hello to. And Strangers in the Night by Frank Sinatra. The 1966 hit croons the tale of two strangers meeting and instantly clicking, a quintessential ode to love at first sight. Well, I definitely, as I was thinking about things to do with strangers, I was thinking of films. There are actually two of my most favorite films, one by Alfred Hitchcock, the other by Orson Welles. Strangers on a Train, Hitchcock, 1951, American psychological thriller, thriller noir that he produced and directed, based on the 1950 novel Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. It's also a great read. Well, the story is about two strangers who meet on a train, one of whom is a psychopath who suggests that they, quote, exchange murders so that neither will be caught. Well, in 2021, the film was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. It is definitely captivating, encouraging you to see it if you never have, or re-see it if you saw it a long time ago. Also, The Stranger, Orson Welles' great film. It's not so much talked about, but it has a lot of style and intrigue than most pictures in the history of film. And he directed it. He stars in it. The other star is Edward G. Robinson, who as a government agent is on the hunt for a man he believes to actually be a Nazi fugitive named Franz Kindler. Wells, who has not only taken the name of Charles Rankin, but has also caught the eye of the Supreme Court Justice's daughter, Mary Longstreet, played by Loretta Young, marries the lovely lady as just one step in his ever-growing plan to help spread his beliefs. Oh my, you be on the edge of your seat watching that one. It's quite a film, quite a story, and quite fabulous acting, as far as I'm concerned. Laurie Blauner, Matisse in the Company of Strangers. Could only see their forms and sizes, an alphabet of color, the clouds gone haywire against the fact of sky. The conversation meanders to how ready life is to leave, the way abstractions of gray birds always know how to fly without our help. And Matisse says he believes in imagination for even the slightest things. White roses imitating angels, the half-smiles of fish or music leaking into a library. The moon rises like a glimpse of light seen from the distance of a keyhole in a dark room. All the strangers' faces turn smooth and featureless in their representation of the turning of one century into another, and Matisse can only think about capturing a little brown, the mimicking red, radiant blue, and sympathetic green in shapes that defy this changeable world. Lovely. Thank you, Laurie Blauner. New to me. I love to bring new poems in and new poets that you also may not have experienced before. The Russian Marina Tsvetaeva. This is from her poem from 1916, translated by Ilya Kaminsky and Jean Valentine. Where does such tenderness come from? Where does such tenderness come from? These aren't the first curls I've wound around my finger. I've kissed lips darker than yours. The sky is washed and dark. Where does such tenderness come from? Other eyes have known and shifted away from my eyes. But I've never heard words like this in the night. Where does such tenderness come from? With my head on your chest, rest. Where does this tenderness come from? And what will I do with it? Young stranger, poet, wandering through town, you and your eyelashes, longer than anyone's. Spasimo, Marina Tsvetaeva. Beautiful. Well, one day walking around the Central Park Reservoir in New York City, my neighboring lake as I thought of it, and it appeared to me, December 2017, this poem came into me very poignantly. Hello, stranger. Shadow dancer in my thoughts, on this path, round these reservoired waters, where we walked hand in hand, heart in heart, through seasons of light, delight, all life's weather, until you, my once beloved lover, became a stranger, disappeared into odd corners of yourself, your old or some other far-removed world, leaving only faint traces of our times, like these remembered footsteps, the outlines of a now so strangely missing caring, so strangely relinquished kinship. See, I might pass on this. It's a good poem. I'll point you to it. I think I have a feeling I'll keep going with some other things for us. But because I was about to say, speaking of other kinds of people that were familiar, not familiar anymore. But what about going to school reunions and meeting maybe way out in time people who kind of but don't know. This is 50th Reunion West Side High. It's a poem by William Trowbridge. You can find it at poetryfoundation.org. So I'm going to put that aside, maybe for another time. But I want to come to the poet May Sarton, who wrote The House by the Sea. It's a journal, beautifully moving book, on what the heart keeps when the mind goes. She writes on loving a loved one through dementia, one of her great love in her life. She was 33 when she met Judith Matlack, 12 years her senior. She and Judy fell in love, consecrated in Sarton's almost unbearably beautiful poetry collection, Honey in the Hive, When they separated 13 years later, they remained not only friends but nothing less than family to each other. Judy was not yet 70 when dementia began fraying her mind. Uncoupled and childless, she moved into a nursing home. Sarton visited regularly. Once she settled into her house by the sea in Maine, she often had Judy stay with her for several days, visits beautiful and bittersweet, for the familiar warmth between them was haunted by Judy's fading mind. And Sarton wrote this: "It makes me feel abandoned and desperately lonely. Lonely partly because I believe no one can quite understand, who has not experienced it, what it is to lose through senility the person closest to you." Have you had such experiences, my friends, or having them now, or know of others close to you who are? I do know some. Freya Manfred, this stranger, my husband. The older we get, the stranger my husband becomes, and the less certain I am that I know him. We used to lie eye to eye, breathing together too, in the immensity of each moment. Lithe and starry-eyed. We could leap fences, even with babies on our back. His eyes still dream off towards something in the distance I can't see. But now he gazes more zealously and leaps into battle with a more certain voice over politics, religion, or art, and some old friends won't come to dinner. The molecules of our bodies spiral off into the stars on winds of change and chance as we welcome the unknown, the incalculable, the spirit and heart of everything we named and knew so well, and never truly named or knew, but only loved at last. Thank you, Freya Manfred, this stranger, my husband. Welcome, stranger, to this place, the poet William Blake set to song. Yes, there's an album by that title that set 12 of his most beloved poems to song, and the first track, after which the album is titled, borrows its title from the first line of his song First by a Shepherd, found in his collected poems. I want to read this to you. Welcome, stranger, to this place, where joy doth sit on every bough. Paleness flies from every face, we reap not what we do not sow. Innocence doth like a rose bloom on every maiden's cheek. Honor twines around her brows. The jewel health adorns her neck. Thank you, Blake. The great English writer Rebecca West on survival, the redemption of suffering, and the life-saving will to keep walking the road to ourselves. This is from Black Lamb and Grey Falcon, her remarkable 1941 account of her 3 visits to Yugoslavia, published at the peak of World War II and exploring that country, made by World War I. It's a poignant revelation of, as she said, the past side by side with the present it created. Here's a paragraph from that resonated with me. If during the next 1,000,000 generations there is but one human being born in every generation who will not cease to inquire into the nature of his fate, even while it strips and bludgeons him, someday we shall read the riddle of our universe. We shall discover what work we have been called to do and why we cannot do it. If a mine fails to profit by its riches and a church wastes the treasure of its altar, we shall know the cause. We shall find out why we draw the knife across the throat of the black lamb or take its place on the offensive rock, and why we let the gray falcon nest in our bosom, though it buries its beak in our veins. We shall put our own madness in irons. Rebecca West. This next one begins with a quote by Emily Dickinson. It's a poem by Rita Dove. I have been a stranger in a strange land. And here's the Dickinson line. Life's spell is so exquisite, everything conspires to break it. It wasn't bliss. What was bliss but the ordinary life? She'd spend hours in patter, moving through whole days, touching, sniffing, tasting, exquisite housekeeping in a charmed world. And yet there was always more of the same, all that happiness, the aimless being there. So she wandered for a while, bush to arbor, lingered to look through a pond's restive mirror. He was off cataloging the universe, probably, pretending he could organize what was clearly someone else's chaos. That's when she found the tree, the dark, crabbed branches bearing up such speechless bounty. She knew without being told this was forbidden. It wasn't a question of ownership. Who could lay claim to such maddening perfection? And there was no voice in her head, no whispered intelligence lurking in the leaves. just an ache that grew until she knew she'd already lost everything except desire, the red heft of it warming her outstretched palm. Thank you, Rita Dove, for that. Now coming to our last musings and sharings for this week. Alyssa Leigh, L-E-I-G-H, Nomadology. Nomadology. In the beginning, a word, move, then a plan, and then the reasons, which I do not remember exactly. I remember clearly only the clothes we were given for the journey and the last silent meal we ate. We left the place as lightly as we had come so many years before. From a sunlit state of innocence where white sheets were hung to dry like clouds over paradise, from eucalyptus-scented earth, a red house with a yard swung between dreaming hills, pillaged by raccoons, framed with lilies like trumpets of the archangels, we moved into history, a river slowed by many bends, a village of peacocks with 100 eyes, a low house among fields with an iron stove, a winter shrine, a fireplace blackened by time, the fragile bones of a sparrow frozen in the shape of its flight. When Father played his trombone in the attic, school children tittered in the street. In the late afternoon, the cows assembled at the gate, witless, waiting for a farmer's son. Home, the children conjugated verbs, found variables, and drew diagrams of the human heart. Evenings, the round kitchen table, lit by a low Dutch lamp, summoned poets, players, horse thieves to glasses of Geneva. An incense of gossip rose slowly, blackening the walls. Outside, horses pawed the darkness, breathing delicate feathers of ice. We courted the favors of spiders, mice, and moles. Our words grew small and porous as fossil bones. Our gestures groaned with the cold. The will-less world of water, wood, and stone taught us when to yield. When it came time to move along again, we were four strangers waving at each other in slow motion across a deafening expanse of ocean. Thank you. Thank you for that poem. Yeah. Alyssa Leigh. Frederick Seidel. Me. The fellow talking to himself is me, though I don't know it. That's to say, I see him every morning shave and comb his hair and then lose track of him until he starts to care, inflating sex dolls out of thin air in front of his computer, in a battered leather chair that needs to be thrown out. Then I lose track until he strides along the sidewalk on the attack with racist, sexist outbursts. What a treat this guy is, glaring at strangers in the street. Completely crazy, but not at all insane. He's hot, but there's frostbite in his brain. He's hot, but freezing cold and oh so cool. He's been called a marvelously elegant ghoul. But with a torn rotator cuff, even an elegant faun has to go through shoulder seizures to get his jacket on. He manages spastically, his left shoulder's gone. It means in pain. He's drastically awake at dawn. A friend of his with pancreatic cancer who will die is not in pain so far, and she will try to palliate her death. Is what her life is now. The fellow's thinking to himself, yes, but how? Riding a motorcycle very fast is one way to. The moon and stars rapidly enter you while you excrete the sun. You ride across the earth looking for a place to lay the eggs of your rebirth. The eggs crack open and out comes everyone. The chicks chirp and it's begun, and it's fun. You keep on writing till you write yourself away, and even after, when you're nothing, you still stay. The eggs crack open and out comes everyone. The chicks chirp, the poems speak, and it's again begun. Speaking of someone else for a change, not me, there was that time in Stockholm when so strangely outside a restaurant in blinding daylight a tiny bird circled forever around us and then without a word lightly landed on my head and settled there, and you burst into tears. I was unaware that 10 years before the same thing had happened just after your young daughter died, and now it must have been Maria come back from the dead a second time to speak and receive the recognition we all seek. Thank you, Frederick Seidel. From Widening Income Inequality, his collection. Derek Walcott, Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself, arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome, saying, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Thank you, Derek Walcott. Yes, let us feast on our lives always. Come home to ourselves, our hearts, or any part of our beings we've been estranged from or strangers to. Yes. This was on a lunar eclipse, January 2019, blood moon. The only thing warm tonight in the deep winter sky, and soon to occlude the wolf moon, ice moon, old moon. During its dowsing, a time for howling out our truth to the star-studded universe, so deeply listening, offering up wonder for these rare passages of our planetary nature, like generations of strangers, of ancestors before us, divining the light inside our shadow as it passes so silently, so mysteriously, red-bloodedly over the earth. A.E. Housman's classic poem, A Shropshire Lad, 52, far in a western brookland. Far in a western brookland that bred me long ago, the poplars stand and tremble by pools I used to know. There, in the windless night time, the wanderer, marveling why, halts on the bridge to hearken how soft the poplars sigh. He hears, long since forgotten in fields where I was known, here I lie down in London and turn to rest alone. There, by the starlit fences, the wanderer halts and hears my soul that lingers sighing about the glimmering weirs. Thank you, Houseman. From the Urban Dictionary, don't be a stranger. Usually used as a farewell, as you know, inviting one to visit again or communicate more often. And friends, I say that to you. Those newly here, don't be a stranger. Come again, come often. Always happy to have you. Have all enthusiastic listeners and eager and interested listeners. Well, next to last, till we're together again, here over the airwaves, this is Fred Lamott's poem, Lamotte, Awake. Perhaps you didn't notice how, when you awoke this morning, you took your first breath in the next dimension, having shifted to another world where atoms vibrate to a different law. It doesn't matter anymore if you are on the left or right, Christian or Muslim, a doer or non-doer, of the north or of the south. It doesn't matter anymore whether you see one or two. You need not wear a veil here in the softer daylight where the only authority is presence. The tribe you once belonged to leaves no scent. The glow of your essential oil anoints the meadows now, greening branches, thickening fur, the hungry ones who need a touch, a tear, no longer drawn by your beliefs, but by your musk and radiance. It matters not what movement you join or which master you follow, as long as she is the one who descends through your breath, blossoming in the splendor of your chest, and you rest in your hollow, in your core of healing silence, this formless flower that keeps opening its golden cup of overwhelming fragrances, distilled from the dark furrow that runs down your body. Arise and come, begin your task. The whole earth thirsts for your light, dear love, the way it rainbows through your face like no other. Hear the new song flowing out of you. Chitananda Rupam Shivaham Shivaham. I am the divine, I am the divine, the very form of consciousness and bliss. Don't ask what work you will do. Just keep listening for this music in the heart of every stranger. Beautiful. Thank you, Fred Lamont, very much. Actually, not next to last. I actually slipped in one or two other things that I wanted you to take with you. From the Irish philosopher-poet John O'Donohue. Your beloved and your friends were once strangers. Somehow at a particular time they came from the distance toward your life. Their arrival seemed so accidental and contingent. Now your life is unimaginable without them. Similarly, your identity and vision are composed of a certain constellation of ideas and feelings that surface from the depths of the distance within you. To lose these now would be to lose yourself. And last, yes, for now. A great freedom. This is from November 2016. A great freedom I've found, and founded a way of flourishing on, is to be able to be my fullest, freest self with another, whether friend, lover, or stranger well met, unedited, unabridged, understood, where all expression is safe, is heard heart to heart. A navigational principle I use to move liberatingly through this fleeting journey into openings of greater aliveness that are each, even small, all large, and once, only once, a chance in a lifetime. Thank you again, friends, for leaning in, thinking and feeling in, for reflecting on strangers from that other undiscovered someone you see, pass by, or meet, to your own undiscovered, fully realized self. Also, thank you for sharing this and other show links with friends, or posting them out to your social media. Your word of mouth is quite valuable, and it's the way others find their way here. I do invite your comments from listening to hear what resonates. I also invite your support of these weekly programs that are made with great care and creativity to illuminate and animate you. Is there some theme you'd like to see me shape a broadcast on going forward? If so, send me an email, colin@thepoetisphere.com. And what about your experience of this show on The Stranger? And if you are making a contribution, thank you so much. You can do that by Venmo to Fivefold, FIVEFOLD @pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email. You can also mail a check along to me, P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island 02891, or donate through my site, thepoetorialist.com, by way of the Donate tab. And, of course, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist. And you can also visit the Poetisphere, an oasis of regenesis for seekers of greater aliveness and possibility that I'm guiding, thepoetisphere.com. Freely explore there as a visitor or subscriber. There's so much to enliven you. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in here soon again. Until then, dear listeners, let's look at seeming strangers less hesitantly or standoffishly, as allies perhaps for a while, as that fellow told us in his anecdote, more as people we simply just don't know, and as sometimes wonderful spirits to meet, to engage when we get to know them a bit, or share our hearts or energies with them briefly or more than briefly, sometimes delightfully, sometimes poignantly, sometimes memorably, at times in a heartbeat. Maybe they're an oyster with a beautiful pearl inside. And let's remove the strangeness in or estrangement from our own selves whenever we can. As Derek Walcott so beautifully wrote in his poem, Love After Love. Love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Yes, indeed. Well, goodbye for now. And good spirits.